Now, as you all know, back in the 1960s, James Brown sang "It's a Man's World," and sadly today it sort of still is, particularly it seems to me in cyberspace in general, and Wikipedia at times in particular, when male entries dominate. Male entries often overshadow, unfairly, female entries. Well, our next guest and her team has been doing their best to put that right in the field of art and crafts. Her name is Steph Fuller. She's director at Ditchling Museum of Art and Craft, and they just had a Saturday Edit-a-thon when they tried to add some of the great female craftspeople, artists and artisans to that Wikipedia list. And I'm delighted to say Steph Fuller, director of Ditchling Museum, joins us now. Good morning, Steph.
Good morning to you.
Now, have I outlined accurately what you were trying to do at the weekend? Talk us through it from your perspective, please.
Okay, so at the moment at the museum we have an exhibition on called Women's Work, which is about pioneering women crafts between the two world wars. And when we were doing our research for this show, one of the things that was very striking was how little published material there is and how difficult it is to actually find out about these women, even though their work is fantastic and they had really interesting lives and actually they're really significant. So we started digging around a bit and talking to people who were involved with Wikipedia, particularly because everybody uses Wikipedia nowadays. It's like the encyclopedia.
Sure.
But actually, most of these people just weren't there. And there's actually a movement within Wikipedia of people who are trying to redress the balance. So there's a kind of great dearth of women's biographies. So Wikipedia has only about 10% editors who are women, and probably not unconnected with that. There's a really low proportion of biographies of women as well in all fields, not just in the arts and crafts.
So even unconsciously, there must be some element of bias, if it's not intentional even.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's any kind of malevolence in it, but I think because Wikipedia is a kind of community resource, so the information there is put onto it by the people who participate, and everybody does it freely and voluntarily. It was a kind of internet thing in the early days. Lots of those people were men. It's just kind of become a self-perpetuating thing. So I think it's up to us. If we want it to be full of good, equal information about everybody, we need to put some effort into to make that happen.
So I'm particularly keen on this idea because I'm blessed with 4 daughters. The youngest of whom is doing a fine art degree down in Cornwall, and she's done a lot of kind of research on this, and she knows that I love the poetry of W.B. Yeats. I like the plays and art of his brother Jack Yeats. But shame on me, I hadn't really registered how important Yeats' sisters were, and they set up with him and established and ran a beautiful publishing house called the Koala Press. But of course they tend to get sidelined, and I'm sure it's only because they're women. They're as important, certainly in kind of book publishing, in the beauty of these books. They're very kind of William Morris influenced. And I know William Morris worked with lots of women whose work is often overlooked.
Indeed. I mean, the women who are in our exhibition, they're kind of the generation after that. So lots of women worked for Morris, but very much kind of in the workshops in a more kind of anonymous way. Whereas I think this sort of second wave after the First World War, there were a lot of very enterprising women who decided they were going to set up their own crafts businesses and be known in their own right, and were very, very successful doing that. And they're a really interesting bunch of characters, and were very much part of that early 20th century studio crafts movement. But again, a lot of the men are more famous and better known.
Sure.
And we think the women should be kind of in there and seen for the influences that they were too.
And I suppose it followed the explosion of early feminism, following women getting the vote, following the emancipation of many women in the workplace, at least for the period of the First World War. So I suppose some of them continue that. Were you surprised by some of the names you heard, Steph, over the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, we focused in on textiles, jewellery and pottery and ceramics for this particular show. But there was somebody who'd come from Cambridge who's writing a book about women stained glass makers in the early 20th century, which hand on heart, I know very little about at all. Yep. So fascinating, but actually there are loads of them and they're fantastic. And how, so that was really interesting. So I think, there's there's so much more stuff out there that we could all find out about that would just enrich that story of what was going on in the arts and crafts in that period.
And how does it work with all the information you've gathered, or do people kind of go onto Wikipedia and edit it on the day?
Yeah, so the way it works is we're working with a fantastic guy called Pat Hadley, who's an expert Wikipedian. So
Hang on, whoa, Steph, you've let a bloke get involved? What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, we had a number of men who came along to help. It's not kind of only women's stuff for women. This is very much about, this is stuff for everybody.
Sure.
You know, and anybody that wants to help us get it out there, we're happy to have them get involved. So Pat's been helping us with the technical side, because we're essentially all Wikipedia virgins, so he's teaching us how it works. So there was a bit of training in terms of how to do it, and then we had lots of research material, because in order to write for Wikipedia, you have to be able to evidence, where is this information? Sure. You can't just write your opinions. So you have to have all the references there. And then we've been starting kind of warming up by editing and improving some of the pages that are already there. And now we're going to go on and start writing some more biographies from scratch.
Brilliant stuff. You've got another one of these Edit-a-thon days planned, I think, in the autumn. Is that right? Can you tell us a bit of...
We're going to be doing one in October. So we had a lot of interest in this one, including from lots of people who said, we can't come to this, but we'll come in October. And we've also got a number of people now who've said that they'll work with us virtually, so they don't necessarily have to be in the room to be doing it.
Right.
I don't know quite how that's going to play out in practice, but it'd be interesting having other people actually all over the world helping to contribute. So we've got our kind of hit list of the people we really want to get up there, and we're starting to work our way through it. And I hope by the time we get to the end of October, we'll have at least something on for all of them.
And we like to feature museums and galleries and things on the Late Late Early show. Finally, Steph, can you tell us a bit about Ditchling? I know you're down in East Sussex, aren't you, I think?
We are. We're about 10 miles from Brighton. We're just I'm going to put in a quick plug here. You can get here by train. We're just a mile from Hassocks, which is quite a kind of comfortable walk if you can't drive.
Yeah.
So Ditchling is a beautiful village in the middle of the South Downs. And in the beginning of the 20th century, there was a really extraordinary community that grew up there of artists and craftspeople who were drawn there, I think, for a variety of reasons. I mean, notable amongst them are people like Ethel Mary, who was a weaver, who's absolutely kind of core to our collection and the current show, and was very influential on a whole generation of textile practitioners. Frank Brangwyn, who was a painter and a printmaker, the first living artist to ever be given a retrospective by the Royal Academy, and of course very notably Eric Gill, who brought together a whole community of craftspeople and sculptors and printmakers who started in Ditchling and the village and then moved up to the Common, and they had a really interesting kind of
almost a commune, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
It was a kind of community where they lived and worked together, and they set up the Dixieland Guild, and that actually carried on, well into the century. It was actually not dissolved until 1989. So there were sort of several generations of people who moved through there. So we have a collection of all that work. So it's really great to see that work in the place it was made and in the landscape that inspired it.
And of course there's a statue by Gill on the outside of Broadcasting House in the centre of London.
Indeed.
Although he's of course an increasingly controversial figure these days because of things in his private life, but the museum sounds fascinating, Steph. So what's the website then? Just Ditchling Museum would find you, will it?
Ditchling Museum Art Craft, but if you just Google Ditchling Museum, you'll find us, no problem.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much for your time this morning. That was Steph Fuller there, Director of Ditchling Museum of Art and Craft. Talking to me, Paul Ross, on TalkRadio, the talk of the nation.